Hello and welcome to TeleSUR. I'm Carla Gonzalez and this is Interviews from Quito, the program where we explore the big challenges facing this country and the region. 5 months into the COVID-19 pandemic, and Ecuador has been left with not just a sanitary crisis, but a political crisis and even an economic crisis. All of the government's missteps, unpopular decisions, and corruption scandals, as we'll deal with thousands of deaths due to the pandemic, have brought us to this point. So what went wrong? If the government of Lenín Moreno followed one of the most stable periods politically and economically, then why are we going through one of the most difficult times in our history? To discuss this, we have economist Diego Borja. Thank you, Diego, for joining us.
Thank you, Carla. Good morning for all people of TeleSUR.
So we're dealing with a health crisis, but also an economic and political crisis. How did we get to this place?
Yes, the crisis Ecuador is experiencing is the greatest in its entire republic history. The COVID-19 pandemic has only deepened it. Before the pandemic, there had already been a great fall in the economy, institutional destruction, and social decline. The government of Lenín Moreno has not given priority to defending the life and health of the people. Between March and July this year, there are already 24,000 people who have died excessively compared to that in past year. Ecuador occupies of the first places in terms of deaths per inhabitant and in terms of patients per inhabitant, and the last place in terms of diagnostic tests per inhabitant. For instance, in the midst of the pandemic, the government had reduced spending on public health. Dozens of doctors and health workers have died for lack of protective equipment. And along with the health crisis, the country has also fallen into an unprecedented economic crisis. Thousands of workers have lost their jobs and thousands of companies have gone bankrupt. Unemployment and poverty have increased.
Diego, would you say that, as the government said once, that these austerity measures are necessary because we are in a bad economic place, but even though we're going through a pandemic, do you think it's really necessary to lay off workers, to remove all the economic benefits for the most needed population? Is it really necessary to go there, to have austerity measures like the ones we're having now?
Yes, all of that are austerity measures. Obviously, austerity measures are not necessary. They are counterproductive in this context of pandemic. They have generated a weakening of the public health system. That is why thousands of COVID-19 sufferers have died. They have not been able to be treated in public hospitals. That is the greatest loss of country has suffered thousands of people who have died. Investment in health and education have been reduced, but the foreign debt has been paid on time. Millions of dollars that could have gone a long way saving lives have been dedicated to the payments of a tiny group of Ecuadorian debt bondholders. In general, austerity measures are counterproductive when the economic cycle is down, but there are even worse during a pandemic. That is why many countries have refused to apply it. Many countries have said it's not the time for austerity. It is the time for the protection of life and health. The Moreno government has done just the opposite. This is the reason for the enormous number of deaths in the sector. But also, austerity is only for the poor and middle class people. With the richest, with the luckiest, there has been no austerity. They have continued to benefit from that cut and large transfers in a country with a GDP of 100 million dollars. There is a tax expenditure that is the transfer for the rich people for already for 7.5 billion. That is the situation.
So, Diego, you were once a finance minister, so you know a lot about creditor bonds and paying our foreign debt. What is happening now in Ecuador? How is the government of Moreno paying these debts, and how is it affecting our economy?
Of course, when the Moreno decide pay the debt, the external debt for a tiny group of bondholders, the national economy, the domestic economy, is in very big problem. The loss of jobs, the bankrupt of enterprises, the down of the production. In the first cut of the central bank for this year, the economy goes fall at already 10%. This is the greatest fall in the recent history.
So, what happened in Ecuador compared this government to the past government? We used to be an example on how to handle our economy during the government of Rafael Correa. So, what is happening with this government? Why is it saying that our economy is going down, that we have no way to pay our debts, that no way to fund social programs, health programs, education programs? What happened? What went wrong?
Lenin Moreno betrayed those who voted for him. During the electoral campaign, he offered to promote government programs that improves the economy, create new jobs, build thousands of homes, improve education and health. Contrary to that, it has dedicated itself to benefit the regions. He has even forgiven debts of people who have paid the taxes. It has facilitated dismissal of work. Public investment spending have increased in the midst cycle of economic decline. He received an economy that was growing, and it is 3 years of government that the economy has continually decreased. For this year, I say the central bank forecast a decrease of around 10%, the largest drop in all of the recent history. Instead, a continuing productive and social investment, it has made itself to privatize some public companies. It has promoted the neoliberal agenda, contrary to the well-being of the population. In March of the last year, he decided to sign an agreement with the International Monetary Fund, and that has been disastrous. Despite the bad experience of Ecuador and other Latin American countries with the IMF, he signed those agreements. This have meant less public investment, greater external debt, and an increase in employment and poverty. That is the result of the Moreno's government.
So now, the government of Moreno is saying that this is all the fault of the last government because they spent too much money in investment on social programs, on education and health. Is it really the fault of the last government that we are in this situation that we, according to the current government, we don't have enough money to pay for hospitals, for medical equipment to fight the pandemic?
That is not real because the before government of the president Correa has invested in education, in the real economy to increase the capacity of Ecuador to produce. In this government, the poverty has fallen, the inequality has diminished. With Moreno, all of these indicators, macroeconomic indicators, social indicators, goes falling.
Indeed. So I also want to talk about the political part because all of these have effects on our economic stability and our political stability as well. But what is happening with the government now? Because we see cases of corruption that continue to appear. We saw the case of the documents for disabilities being used to buy very expensive cars, the overpricing in body bags and medicine to treat COVID-19 patients, even in the contracts to buy food for families that need it. How are those cases affecting the current government, which is just a couple of months away from ending its term?
The support of Lenny Moreno has fallen down. In the middle of the health tragedy, there have been many cases of corruption. This is a miserable thing. Bags of cadavers have been purchased at 12 times the market price. Food aid kits have been purchased twice as much. Bribes have been asked for giving information about the place where the dead are to their relatives. But the greatest corruption is to seek a renegotiation of the external debt, recognizing the price of the bonds at 100%, when in the market they have dropped to 30% of their nominal value. This would be a gigantic loss for enormous loss for the country, greater than all of the hateful cases of corruption that have been reported.
So how do you see the future of this government? Because as of now, we might think that the government is not going for a re-election. Lenín Moreno is not trying to be president again, but will it support any candidate? What is going to happen in the next elections for the government?
The electoral panorama is not clear. It's very uncertain. The electoral panorama for 2021 is still uncertain. There have been attempts to postpone the elections. It has been said that making elections in these pandemic circumstances could be unsafe for the population. The most insecure, in my view, thing is not to make election and continue with a government that has caused so much pain for the population. People want a change of government. No one agrees to postpone the election. Only certain groups in government who know that they will lose their privilege and will have to answer to justice for their action. There is a lot of friction between the parties of the right. For instance, it has been announced that several candidates from that sector will run in the elections. So the left and progressive groups and movements have a great challenge. That challenge is the unity of progressive parties and movements to participate in the 2021 election and win the government. It is imperative to win back the government, to push for a pro people policy, a policy that puts human beings ahead of capital, a political agreement that allows Ecuador to be removed from the abyss in which the government of Lenin Moreno is living it.
And what is the panorama also for the political parties? Because you are part of a political party. We've seen a couple of moves by the electoral court to try to forbid certain parties from presenting presidential candidates for these elections. What is the situation going on so we can explain our audience what is happening at the moment?
The most important about it is the effort of all of the state institutions to prevent the electoral participation of former President Rafael Correa. Several trials have been instituted. Justice have been pursued to sentence the president. Last minute rules have been placed so that if he cannot appear. Finally, his political party has been suspended. Now it's different because the Tribunal Contencioso Electoral has suspended this measure. But at the moment, the former president has been forced to make alliance with other existing parties through which he could participate in this election. However, all these actions revealed a persecution and make the electoral process no transparent. That will be a very problem for our country.
And what do you think will be the first actions that the next government will have to take on matters of the economy, social issues, politics, to try to take back on all the mistakes that this government has done?
The first action of the last government will be change all of this line of political, economic, and social political of the government. Put the people, put the human being behind the capital.
And okay, so we've seen that Ecuador went through a lot of protests in the past, in October specifically, against the government, against the IMF that you mentioned, all the actions that the IMF had demanded from the government of Ecuador. Do you think that we'll be able to see something maybe similar to these protests in the remaining months of the year or even for next year, depending on what happens in the elections?
Depending what happened with the pandemic, the pandemic is not finished. The people continue to die. The people will continue to come sick. Then the people is not ready to go to the streets and protest like the people was October. That is the condition different to express the protest, the mobilization, the political and social mobilization in this moment. But the people want change the government, and the people want another kind of government, and government close to the people, favorable to the people, not for the richest people, but for the great capital.
And just for our last question, how can you compare to how Ecuador is doing now politically and economically with other regions or with other countries in our region? For example, Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, countries that we've always been comparing to on our economic side. How do we look when we compare each other?
We have two groups of countries to cooperate. First, Brazil, Colombia, and Peru. The political of these countries is similar to the political to the policy of the Moreno's government, but the results uh, in this country about the management of the pandemic is worse. The people in these countries died in the same level with our country. But there are other countries like Venezuela, like Cuba, with another kind of manage of the crisis, and the result is very, very, very good for the people. The people who die, the people who become sick, is less than with our countries or the other countries. That I say.
And I don't know, for a lot of our viewers, maybe they're wondering what is happening with this government, why it is not falling, because we've saw a lot of governments in Ecuador, at least for 10 years ago, that a lot of governments in our country will fall down very easily. We would see protests outside the presidential palace here in Quito, and just days after, the government will fall. There's a lot of pressure put on governments, on presidents. What happened with this government? I'm not saying that it should fall, but I'm saying what happened that it did not fall as many of the previous governments that we've had, Bucaram, with different governments that we've had that have destroyed our economy, have dollarized our economy, for example, Jamil Mawad. Why does this government stay afloat?
That is simply the answer. This government don't have the support of the people, but this government have a support of the big power, economic power, political power, and I said imperial power. That is the reason.
That's a very interesting answer for our question. Thank you very much for joining us, Diego.
Thank you.
So we've been talking to economist Diego Borja on what actions, or better, lack of actions, the government of Ecuador, of Lenín Moreno, is doing in Ecuador, and how the government has put us in this situation. We are dealing with corruption amidst a pandemic, with our economy suffering at all scales, and a political uncertainty that is making us lose the country we fought so hard to get, taking us back decades. Thank you for joining us. This is Interviews from Quito. I'm Carla Gonzalez. Until next time.